9 podcasts.
Welcome to the Trade Off, your daily podcast, giving you the latest insight into this year's AFL trade period. We have finished with an absolute bang. This is for Tyre Power's great race sale. Buy 3 and get 1 free on selected Curnow passenger car and SUV tyres. I'm Laura Spurway. I'm joined here by Essendon legend Matthew Lloyd. Lloydie, have you caught your breath yet?
Oh, only starting to, Laura. It's been an absolutely hectic night and still trying to get our head around what just went on and who were the winners, who were the losers. And sometimes you won't know that for a number of years of just who won these deals. People will make a lot of outlandish statements in the next 24, 48 hours about who may have won and who lost. But it's like a draft. You don't really know for 2 or 3 years.
You hope you've made the right decision. But look, the bombshell from tonight, the deal that didn't go through, Zack Merritt hasn't been traded. Essendon held the line. They held firm. President Andrew Welsh said there's no way he's going anywhere. They were offered, 4 first rounders in the end from the Hawks. Didn't bite.
They didn't, and I always thought that there was a statement that the Bombers would make, but eventually if the deal was right, they would take it. And as I said, I was told today that they wanted a player from Hawthorn and a player who was established, and they didn't get that, and so it had to be something significant. So I don't know how to look at it, Laura. Like, I can't sit here and say whether they did the right thing or not. Like, the Bombers aren't going to play finals for a significant period of time. I think they're still a long way off. So some would say, why not take the first rounders and rebuild yourself? But others will say, you know what, those first rounders they're not top 10 picks really. You know, they're not that high with where Hawthorn will finish. So we don't want to lose our best player. Would rather have our best player, and that's what the Bombers landed on.
So the Bombers, they wanted the 4 first-round picks. The Hawks were saying, look, this is the best we can do, and they threw Henry Hustwaite in the mix. And we've had these conversations about where's the top 15 player that you're going to put on the table. And in the end, there were no other names that were really canvassed. So can people really be surprised that they didn't bite? I mean, there will be people saying, look, Zack Merritt's 30, as his manager Tom Petracca says, he's 31 next year and he's going to lose value.
Yeah, and the gap between Zack and the next best is so big at the Bombers that they just didn't want to lose their best player. But how he gets over it, he's going to take a long time to get over this. Emotionally, he's withdrawn himself from the club, and to have to go back there, it's going to be a challenge for a lot of people. I hope now they sit back, which I said before this, when this first was announced, they have to take a good look at themselves as a club, listen to some of Zack's frustrations that he believes has never been fixed or adjusted to. He probably wants development of players to be better. Probably the way the team is playing the game. There's not many All-Australians, so players haven't developed like he'd want them to. He hasn't won many games. He wants to win finals. So now to repair those relationships is going to take a lot of doing.
I just wonder what he does when he goes back in there, how he carries himself. I mean, we know he's a champion player with the best and fairest that he's won, with what he's done for the football club. But what do you do in this next year now?
And we're going to talk about the hard calls later on, Laura, around the captaincy. So that's something that we'll discuss later on. But what do you do? All you can do is put your head down and train hard. Put everything out on the table and maybe sit in a room and have it out. That's all you can do. Players should be open and up front towards Zack of what they think. And some may say, we think you're being selfish. And Zack can put back to them, I don't think you blokes work hard enough. And hopefully they all leave the room thinking and taking things forward because, as I said, there is a disconnect there. As
an Essendon person, do you respect that they've held the line, or do you think this is a missed opportunity?
That's where I said I'm really torn. I respect that if they believe... I think they initially believed that Hawthorn thought they were a broken club and that they'd just be able to take Zack Merritt. So I don't think it started very well. And it was going to then take a lot for Hawthorn to be able to get the deal done. So I think the Bombers just did feel that they thought, Merritt's got a broken relationship with us. We should just be able to get him. And they felt that it was disrespectful, the offers initially. And then it was probably a long road back from that. So I'll respect what they've done in that situation because they've already got pick 5 and 6. Where you can get 2 high-quality players anyway. So they thought to themselves, well, do we need any more picks? We've already drafted so many other players early as well at the club. So I'll stick with it. They probably did the right thing if they didn't feel they got the player from Hawthorn they wanted.
Well, the Hawks camp looked pretty despondent,
Yeah.
didn't they, that this didn't go through? But Sydney Swans, on the other hand, they were up and about.
Yeah.
Charlie Curnow's manager punching the air, high fives going around, because this is an incredible deal. So Charlie Curnow traded to Sydney. He will be a Swan next season. So 26 and 27 first rounders going Carlton's way, and they get Will Hayward. So effectively it's 3 first-round picks plus a player, which is the biggest deal in a trade period, because obviously now those future picks 2 years ahead are coming into play.
Yeah, so Carlton are going to have 2 first-rounders for the next 3 years. So they've been given Sydney's 25, 26, 27 first-rounders, plus they'll have their own. So, what I will say, though, is Carlton haven't been in a good space either, and they've fallen a long way off the pace in terms of where they're at. So while you get in this situation because you haven't been going well and players want to leave and players haven't been happy and Charlie Curnow hasn't been happy, I know other players haven't been happy either. So it all looks great, but now they've got to sort themselves out as a club. So the win is Sydney get the best player in the trade period because I think Charlie's capable of kicking 70 goals for the Swans next year and potentially helping them win a premiership because I think that Joel Amati, Logan McDonald, Hayden McLean, those guys just aren't good enough. So Charlie comes in and he's going to have players putting it down his throat in a way that he's never seen at Carlton before, and he's won 2 Colemans already there. So it's great for Sydney, but they had to sell the farm to get him, and I think Carlton are in a wonderful position to, if they get their act together, to rebuild really nicely.
And getting Ollie Florent and Will Hayward is not bad for them.
And Ainsworth and Chesser. Yep. So they have be real freshness to the group and I think Hayward's the one though. I think and Florent's better than what he showed this year. If he can use the ball well, because they need good ball users at Carlton, and Hayward provides something. Now Curnow's gone. I think Curnow and Mackay used to get in each other's way. Now I think Mackay's the main man. Hayward's a great number 2 or 3 potentially. Ainsworth at their feet, plus other players around them. I think it's a real different mix. But Vossi's got to move the ball differently to give all these guys a chance.
Yep. I think the strategy with Carlton in this trade period has Graham Wright written all over it. Yeah. And you can tell they've been very active, and I think they had to be. And
just on that, Laura, Robbie D'Orazio said the sticking point has all been the 2027 first rounder, and it was who was going to blink first, and the Swans blinked. He said in the last 10 minutes of the trade period to give Carlton what they wanted. Yeah,
they were rushing down the hallway to get the paperwork done, weren't they? Another big deal from today, Melbourne traded Christian Petracca. Look, this is another big deal.
Huge.
Gold Coast gave up 2 first-round picks, so 7 and 8, and a second-round pick, 37. So, he's found a new home. We knew that he wanted a new home. I think the Suns have done pretty well out of this trade period as well. I know, they've lost a couple of players, but, after all the hot air about Humphrey, well, that didn't happen. They held on to him. They've got Jamara for, pick 74, which is nothing for the Dogs, but the salary piece is a bargain if he puts his head down and goes well. But adding Christian Petracca to that Suns midfield, which is already stacked in the Brownlow medalist Matt Rowell and obviously Noah alongside him, that's pretty formidable.
It is, and I think both clubs would be pretty happy. So Melbourne now have an amazing draft position, pick 7 and 8, and they've had 2 top 10 draft picks in the previous 2 drafts as well. So they've had 6 high-end picks that they'll have had in the doors. It was a real culture shift for Melbourne. Stephen King's walked in, would have sat and listened, and he would have heard, we've just got, I think, Christian seen as being selfish. Clayton's been undisciplined. Stephen May's been undisciplined. So he's made some really tough calls. A lot of coaches will go, no, I want Christian Petracca because he can help me win games. I think Stephen King's been bold in doing that. The Suns, they're ready to go. So they're ready to win a premiership from next year, and Christian can help them do that. So I think it's pretty good for both clubs in this situation.
The biggest trade to happen at the Suns since Gary Ablett Jr.?
Yeah, it would be. And hopefully Christian can get back to his best. Like this year, I just didn't see a player who did much damage with the ball. His kicking was extremely poor, but he was a top 5 player in the comp before his injury. So, I think they have relied too much on Rowell and Anderson and Miller. So now to add that that player to the mix and still have Humphrey there, as you said.
Ridiculous.
It's pretty exciting.
So obviously Melbourne, the other player out the door officially today is Clayton Oliver. He will be a Giant for a 2026 third round pick, and obviously the Ds are picking up some of that salary to compensate for that move. But I mean, this is such an interesting turn of events given, this happens so rapidly in terms of the Ds, getting their new coach and saying to Clayton Oliver, we want you to look around, go elsewhere. When you consider that he had interest from Geelong last year and there were first rounders thrown in the mix with that offer, which was rejected. And now we find ourselves a year on and he's gone for a third round pick.
And that's what I suppose Essendon have to think about, that this time last year, Brad Green stood up at the best and fairest and he said the starting centre bounce will be Petracca and it'll be Oliver and that, because they were sort of saving face a little bit because they didn't want to be seen to be losing players, but then 12 months on you lose them anyway. So, but at least Merritt's an absolute professional and he's the hardest trainer at the club. He's the most diligent person at the club, whereas Oliver wasn't, and he was hard work for them. So talented, but he moves on. And I think these types of players, I've seen it before through my time. First year they're very good, and then they can start to waver. So you have to keep the foot on the throat for guys like Clayton Oliver to be disciplined. And but that they've got no Josh Kelly, so they fill a need in the midfield at the Giants.
And that money that Melbourne had committed to on the long-term deal for Clayton Oliver was just going to be this noose around their necks, I think, that was just going to be so hard to work through. They've still got to pay. Yeah. And that's the ugly side of it. Like, you still got this bill that you're paying. But, it's clear that they wanted him gone that badly that they were going to do it.
That's right. So they'll still pay, you'd think, maybe, I don't know, if he's got 5 years, they'll at least be paying at least $2.5 million. You'd think, $500 a year. But they're pretty much cutting their losses, Laura, to say, okay, it's better than paying the rest of it, because if we hold him one more year, there might be no deal. So that's where it's at.
Couple of deals that fell over today as well. So Rowan Marshall, he didn't get his wish to go to Geelong. The offer there wasn't strong enough. St Kilda's held firm on that. Buku Khamis was another name that was thrown up for the Blues. It would have been a good addition to the Blues. Not traded in the end. I hope the Dogs utilise him more in the back line, which is where their gap's been, but that's been interesting what they've decided to do. Cal Archie, not traded. Not traded to Adelaide. Brisbane wasn't happy with the deal that was being offered, but he's out of contract, Lloydie, so pre-season draft?
I know. So on Marshall, Andrew Mackey said that they felt they gave them really strong offers, but St Kilda said no, so that's fair enough. St Kilda really rate him highly. Khamis, sometimes you just get squeezed when you're not one of the big fish in the pond. You can get left and miss out.
Carlton was busy late in the day.
They were, so miss out. And Archie, I'm still trying to understand this one. Like, I remember Nick Stevens, Carlton Collingwood had a big go where it was Carlton and Port Adelaide, I think, where they couldn't. Sorry, Collingwood and Port Adelaide, I should say, and they wouldn't agree, so ended up going to Carlton with the first pick in the pre-season draft because, but when he wanted to be a Collingwood player, whereas Archie, I just wonder whether another club would try and take him. Will he stay at Brisbane? How can he get to Adelaide when Adelaide finish, 5th or 6th on the ladder? How can they get him all the way there?
Yep.
So that's something for everyone to try and work out.
And the other one that fell over, Jai Simpkin, not traded in the end. So it's interesting that the North camp said, that Collingwood put an offer in. It was nowhere near what they wanted for Jai Simpkin. But, the role that he wants to play at North, he's been told, well, there probably won't be a position for you there. But at the same time, you're going to have to stay here.
Yeah. North wanted 2 first-rounders was the talk, which was too much.
Yep.
And so for what he's put out there. So he'll be another one that's disappointed, wanting to go to a club in the window. So he's just got to go back. And, if you can't get a spot in the midfield at North, he's got to ask himself questions of how he can get better, because it's not as if he's up against Petracca, Anderson and Rowell. It's sort of young blokes who have gone past him, so he has to improve himself.
Well, the Saints were happy to give up their skipper in the end, weren't they? Yeah. Jack Steele goes to Melbourne for a round 3 selection in the 2027 AFL draft. Look, I think that's probably a reasonable result for Jack, given he was pretty much condemned to a year in the VFL, wasn't he?
Yeah, spot on, Laura. I think a smart move, really smart, and he's fortunate that Melbourne have come along, because St Kilda, when you get told go and explore your options, it's pretty much saying for your own benefit, go and see if someone else will take you. And he gets another year on his contract. So I remember Isaac Smith, when he went to Geelong, saying that if I stayed at Hawthorn, I probably only had 1 year left.
Yep.
And then he goes on and plays for another 3 and wins a flag. And that's at least Jack Steele gets to play for another couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know if Brody Mychek's going to win a flag, but that was a big reason in him going to the D's as well.
Yeah.
They were going to offer him a 2-year deal over a 1. So the Swans have also traded Ollie Florent, as we mentioned earlier, to Carlton for a round 3 selection in the 2026 AFL draft. Hawthorn's traded Jai Sarong in a round 4 selection, which is tied to the Hawks, to Sydney for a round 3 selection in the 26 AFL draft. So that's not a bad pickup for Sydney either, I think, in Jai Sarong.
Yeah, he's just craving opportunity. When you got Battle and Barras in front of you, and Scrimshaw and Sicily, he was never going to get a look in. So Sydney do have holes in defence. Dane Rampy's getting older. And then you've got McCartan, who's often had his head knocks. So it's a good opportunity for a good young player.
You've got a sheet of a lot of numbers in front of you, which are making my eyes glaze over. But if we can summarise it, now that the trade period's done, if we look at the clubs who have won and lost this year's trade period. Now, for me, initially, I thought Gold Coast was one of the winners, purely because they've added Petracca to the midfield mix, as we've spoken about. I think if Jamara goes well, that's an absolute bargain for them. That's an if. Yes. We don't know that yet, as you've mentioned. Yes. Like there's a lot to test out there. But you think, Carlton? Melbourne?
I think it's a tricky one. Carlton, I could see the smiles on their faces.
They
were absolutely rapt because they've set themselves up. So Vossi can see this through. You want to be there in 4 years' time, probably at Carlton, as a coach, because all these kids are going to grow together. Because you've got Jagger Smith, who comes in, who's back for an ACL. I know Jagger from coaching against him. He'll captain Carlton one day. That's how impressive he is. And then you've got Dean, Charlie Dean, Peter Dean's coming in as a father-son, and then you've got Walker's son as well in a couple of years' time. So they've got so much to look forward to, plus pick 9 and 11, plus all the picks coming through, plus Hayward coming in and Florence. So that's pretty exciting for them. And then Melbourne built for the future, but then they've also lost Petracca and Curnow. So I think it's for the now. Petracca and Curnow is really strong to win next year's premiership. But then for the future, it's Carlton and Melbourne. And I did like what St Kilda did because they want to be relevant. They're sick of finishing 12th, and they've had a crack. And De Koning, I think, is a big in along with Flanders.
I think St Kilda has been aggressive all year leading into the trade period, so they'd sort of stamped their authority on what they were going to do before we even got here, and we've seen that with their acquisitions. What about the losers, the clubs that have lost out?
I've got 3. I think Hawthorn, because they let Warple go and didn't replace. So Will Day becomes massive with his body. I've got the Adelaide Crows, who originally wanted Christian Petracca, missed out on him. So I just don't know. And then Riley Sanders was mentioned, but they weren't able to bring. So I'm just not sure that midfield is going to Rankin comes back, but whether that midfield's good enough to take them to a grand final. And then you got Collingwood, who obviously probably wanted De Goey out, wanted Simpkin in, and they again are a side that weren't good enough come September. And how are they going to improve? So they were 3 clubs for me.
So Justin Lepich, I think I saw him say that there weren't really any bites on De Goey. And I think what's interesting now that trade finishes is that you enter the period where there will be more players that are delisted because clubs sort of sit in a holding pattern while trade's going on. They've got players out of contract. They wait and see what movement they get, who might be available. And there's a number of players that I've mentioned at Collingwood, like Tom Mitchell and Mason Cox, who are out of contract, who've just been sitting there for now, who might be moved on in the next little while. Yeah,
it's a tough time. It's been a absolutely brutal trade period. And so for many, we'll talk about Merritt. Merritt has been spoken about flat out, but you've just touched on Karmas and other players. And then there's many who will be delisted. So at least they're all going to be on a Lekalia. Let's not forget about what went on with him. But then there's the brutal side of being delisted and not having a career. So there's many who have had to wait. And now you're right, there'll be many guys who will lose their positions in the upcoming period to allow for these draft picks coming in. So it's time for our tough calls thanks to Grunt. No matter what you do it with Grunt. There's nothing tougher available exclusively at Bunnings.
So we've had a week and a half for trading. We're heading into the off-season, the draft. We've mentioned delistings. So who needs to make some tough calls over summer?
Mine is what happens in the next day, probably 24 hours, when Brad Scott meets with Zack Merritt and Alistair Clarkson meets with Jai Simpkin. And have they got the decision that's clear-cut that you can no longer captain our football clubs? I think they've probably lost that respect in that their hearts weren't there and not fully invested, where Brad Scott and Alistair Clarkson have to say you won't be the captains of our football club. So that's not 100%, but I'd imagine so, that they're going to have to step out. And Zack Merritt had heard him another time when he was put out of the leadership group a number of years ago. That's going to be really even a tougher conversations, that first they have to walk back in the door, but then to tell them also that you won't be the captain of the footy club either, and you've got to win back the club's respect. So that is some tough calls for them.
I'm going to say St Kilda with Rowan Marshall now, because they obviously didn't want to let him go, but what are you going to do with him? You've got TDK there, everybody knows that. You're going to make him your premier ruckman. Rowan Marshall does a good job in the ruck, so you're hardly dealing with someone who isn't a decent player, who isn't a loyal player, who isn't, revered by the fans. I think the fans love Rowan Marshall. What are you going to do with him? You play him as a high half forward. Like, that's not the role that he plays well. Yeah,
I agree. He wanted to be the number one ruckman, so he loses out on that. So what I'd be saying, if I was his manager, I'd say you have to get to work on your forward craft. Max King will be back as well, and he draws the ball. So he's in a position where he'll be the number 2 forward and the number 2 ruckman. But they'll just have to work it where he and Tom DeConis, one will be on the bench, one might be resting forward, one will be in the ruck. So I think they can make it work, and Rowan he'll have to learn to kick a few more goals and work on his leading patterns. But I think DeConing will do 70% of the ruck with how much they've invested in him.
And then we might be here in a year's time talking about Rowan Marshall again and where he's off to.
Most likely, yeah.
Well, Lloydie, thank you for all your hard work during the trade period. You've been tireless in your dedication, listening to everything, reading those numbers on the sheet. And thank you, everyone, for joining us throughout the 2025 AFL trade period for Tyre Power's Great Race Sale. Buy 3 and get 1 free on selected Curnow passenger car and SUV tyres.